Well, good evening, everyone. This is Carolyn Jacobs. I'm the training manager here at WGBH Education in Boston. And I must say, we are very impressed and appreciative of your interest in this teaching strategy, project-based learning, and of giving up part of your evening to be with us on this webinar. We have muted the participants, and we invite you to interact with each other and the presenters in the chat box. We are recording. Anytime during the webinar, you can download a resource document of what we're highlighting, lots of URLs in it, and that's in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and there should be a download option for that PDF document. Following the webinar, probably will not be until Monday. I will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who registered. It will include the recording link as well as kind of a synopsis of some of the things we covered. It will also have the survey link, and I'm going to be posting the survey in the chat box, and also the survey link is on the resource document that you can download. If you would like to receive a certificate for participation tonight, we ask that you complete the survey and then just let us know in the survey your name and email, and we'll get that out to you. And even if you don't want a certificate, we'd love to have you complete the survey. It's very brief, and it just lets us know what you particularly liked, what we can do better. And because of the response to this webinar, I would imagine that we're going to be doing more on this topic. And so I thought I'd put a question in the survey about what other topics or what other things you would like to learn about PBL or discuss in future webinars. I want to welcome in particular tonight the Pioneer Valley Excellence in Teaching awardees for 2019. And I'd like to introduce Sue Klein, who is the director of the Harold Grinspoon Charitable Foundation, which sponsors the Pioneer Valley Awards each year, to welcome everyone and say a few words. So go ahead, Sue.
Thank you, Carolyn. Welcome and congratulations to the Excellence in Teaching Award winners, past and present, who are on this call. And welcome to hundreds of other educators taking part in the webinar now or at some other point. I'm Sue Klein, Director of the Excellence in Teaching Awards program of the Harold Grinspoon Charitable Foundation. The Teacher Awards program is a partnership of the Grinspoon Foundation along with MassMutual and the Irene E. and George A. Davis Foundation, honoring over 100 Western Massachusetts educators annually and 130 in 2019. We are thrilled to collaborate with WGBY Springfield and WGBH Boston under the leadership of Carolyn Jacobs to offer this webinar showcasing the extraordinary PBS LearningMedia educational resources to which you as educators have access. Tonight's webinar on student engagement and project-based learning is being led by national expert Suzie Boss. Suzie will open our eyes about how this approach can enhance the learning that goes on in classrooms of every type. We hope you will enjoy, communicate with us, get answers, and be enriched by everything you see and hear during the next hour.
Thank you, Sue. Lovely, and I concur. All right, so tonight, very simply, this evening, we are going to spend the lion's share of the time on project-based learning, PBL. And then we will have an introduction to PBS LearningMedia, which can be a very rich research resource for students involved in PBL. And there will be some closing remarks that I'll do along the way. We hope to respond to your questions in the chat box. And if we're able to, we'll be able to identify some questions at the end to respond to. And when Suzie is not speaking, when Beth takes over, she also will be responding to questions in the chat box. And you will have Suzie's contact information for the future. So the very large response we've had to this webinar, I think, speaks to the topic and also the reputation and deep knowledge of our speaker, Suzie Boss, author, consultant, and long-term champion of PBL. Project-based learning is grounded in real-world experience and driven by student interest. Suzie has written that PBL, when infused with technology, may look and feel like a 21st century idea, but it's built on a venerable foundation, and in fact, its roots go all the way back to Aristotle and Confucius. Joining Suzie tonight as a second presenter is Beth Kapitanis, nationally board certified former high school ELA teacher and now education programs coordinator at the public media station WGBY in Springfield. All right, I'm going to let Suzie take it away.
Carolyn, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to the sponsors for this invitation to join you in talking about PBL. Most of all, thank you to all the educators who were with us tonight to dive into this journey together. And it is a journey. My own PBL journey goes back decades now. I'm going to date myself a little bit. But over the last many years, I've had a chance to work with teachers in just about every part of the globe. The photo you see here is a group of educators I worked with in India, subcontinent I've been back to many times now. Project-based learning is taking off for good reason all around the globe as we find better ways to engage students in learning that really matters to them and often matters to those around them as well, to their communities. I'm coming to you tonight from Portland, Oregon, that beautiful spot in the upper left. It actually looked like that yesterday when the sun came out. We're back to clouds today. And I'm affiliated with a couple of organizations that we'll reference tonight in some of the materials. I'm a regular contributor to Edutopia, and I'm also part of the national faculty of a group now known as PBL Works. If you've done some work in project-based learning in the past or looked for resources, chances are you encountered a group called the Buck Institute for Education. It's the same organization, but has just been through a bit of a rebranding to really put the emphasis on PBL and the idea that project-based learning works for everyone. So that's the message there. So let's dig right in. I'm going to be drawing on my two most recent books tonight. Project-based teaching really takes a look at the teacher's role in this whole enterprise, and Reinventing PBL takes a look at what happens when digital tools are part of the learning experience in a really intentional and deep way. So I'd love to find out a little bit more of all of you. Carolyn's going to open the poll for us. And what I'd love to find out is just choose one of these that best describes you. When it comes to project-based learning, are you someone who's an armchair traveler, just kind of thinking about this but not diving in just yet, maybe doing some reading up? Are you a tenderfoot who's just perhaps launching your very first project this year? Or maybe you're an explorer who's done a number of projects and now you've got different sorts of questions than you had on your very first time out. Or perhaps you're someone I would call a scout. That's the kind of educator who can guide and teach others. You're confident and pretty comfortable with project-based learning as a process. So I'm seeing lots of tender feet in the room, lots of explorers, some armchair travelers, a really nice mix of folks. I think we can probably end the poll there, which I'm going to go ahead and do. But wherever you're starting, I guess the message here is there's always more to learn about project-based learning and always ways to go deeper. So wherever you're starting, you're in a perfect place. So we're going to end the poll and go back to our slides. Okay. So we know that project-based learning is really heavy on inquiry. Asking questions is a big key to what makes this whole learning experience work. So our driving question to kind of guide our conversation tonight is, how can we achieve deeper learning by focusing on key characteristics of project-based learning? So really thinking about what's key and thinking about deeper learning. Projects that succeed well, that really achieve deep learning, have some things in common, even if they're about different content areas and even if they reach students of different ages. So if you're chatting away there, feel free to jump in with your ideas of what you think is essential for PBL success. Well, I go ahead and talk about some research and some findings that I think will help clarify the essential qualities of high-quality PBL. But I'd love to see your comments in the chat of what it means to you to think about what's essential for the success of this kind of teaching and learning. I mentioned the organization, the Buck Institute for Education, now known as PBL Works. This group has done a deep dive and some real foundational work in thinking about how do we design projects that have the greatest chance of success. In other words, don't we want to know going into a project what it's going to take for students to really learn in the best way, stretch themselves to the point just at the edge of their comfort level, right where the deep learning happens, and perhaps contribute something useful to their community. So over a couple of years ago, a big research question around what makes for the most effective project-based learning resulted in a framework called the gold standard for PBL. And this is a kind of a simplified version of it. The book that you see on the right takes a deeper dive into this whole question. But let me just talk through these essential project design elements, which are really consistent regardless of the grade level you're teaching, regardless of your content area, and regardless of whether you're working in isolation or with a collaborative team of other teachers, or perhaps on a global ed project, which might involve teachers in different locations. So you might notice learning goals right at the center, and that's very intentional. If you think of this as a camera lens that's opening up, what's in the center focus are the goals. What do we want to get out of this experience with our students? And of course, it has to do with academics, so key knowledge and understanding, the content goals that you're going to learn through doing the project. But just as important are the success skills, and these are things that I'm seeing some of you mention in the chat, things like critical thinking, being able to be an effective researcher, knowing how to collaborate with others. Those sometimes called 21st century skills are just as important as the academic learning goals that happen in project-based learning. So you're really clear as a teacher when you're designing a project that the project has learning goals in mind. You know where you want to get to with your students. You know what's worth learning. This often connects to the content that you're teaching. All around the perimeter of this graphic are those elements that are all of equal importance to help you reach those learning goals that you've identified at the center. So it starts with a challenging problem or question. That's where inquiry kicks off, and then inquiry is sustained throughout the project. So you're not just asking one good question and then figuring, well, we've got inquiry going. Nope, there are cycles of inquiry. You're asking questions. Students are asking questions. You dig in, and chances are what you discover through one round of inquiry surfaces some new questions. So you dig in a little deeper. That continues throughout the project. Authenticity is a key part of project-based learning. This is what students sometimes call real-world learning, or learning that feels like it has a real context. If the project is authentic, it takes away that question of when will we ever need to know this that some of your students may have asked. You might have heard that if you're a teacher of any length. If it's authentic, students really feel like this matters to them. They see the reason for the learning ahead. There's student voice and choice. So even though the teacher has thoughtfully designed the project, students have a voice and a choice in the direction it takes. Reflections embedded throughout. Critique and revision happen throughout. It's not just turn in an answer sheet or turn in an essay and you're done, but you get some feedback, you make it better, so that by the time you share a public product as the culmination of the learning experience, it's really high quality evidence of learning. What students create is something that they're proud of, and it's work that matters not just to them, but often to others. So there's a public facing end of the project. So let's go a little deeper into our understanding. I mentioned projects can hit all grade levels and all content areas. We're going to look at an example in just a moment from a high school, and then a little later we'll look at a video of an elementary example. But just to set the stage, the images you see in front of you, the one on the left is a high school humanities project where students are looking for the unsung heroes in their community and telling their stories. They're asking the question, who are the people in our community who have stood up for justice, and how do we bring more awareness to the work that they do? The one on the upper right is a wonderful middle school history project, social studies, and language arts project in Nashville, where students are looking at the history of the civil rights movement in their own community and creating a virtual tour guide for people who visit Nashville. So they're doing the work of historians to find artifacts and images and videos that tell the story of history, and then creating a tour guide with an app to make that available for visitors. The bottom right is a very young learner, primary grade learner, who's doing part of a team taking a survey of all the plant life on their campus, because they've been challenged with the question of what should grow on our campus. What do we want to have growing here that makes it a good place for learning and a good place for wildlife? So if we want more birds and butterflies and things like that on our campus, what might we want to plant here? So we start by figuring out what's here already. So they're off doing a survey. The one that says Projects That Work, Mission to Mars, that's a nice example that you can find on Edutopia. It's a pretty high-powered physics project where students are designing models of simulators that would land on Mars. So they're going through the whole AP physics curriculum in a project-based learning style. So you see a big range of grade levels, levels of rigor in these examples. But what I'd like to do, in just a moment, we're going to see a video just to set the stage. The project that you're going to see here is called the Finance Project. It's 11th grade. The class is pre-calculus. The teacher is Helena Norfar from Oklahoma. We're just going to watch a little clip of this because I want you to see what happens kind of in the middle of a project. Once she's kicked this off with inquiry, this is a finance project where students are in the role of financial planners for real clients. That authenticity piece is very strong. And their challenge is to use math, the math that they're learning, to come up with financial plans for clients who have very different kinds of needs and resources available. So let's take a little watch and listen to some students interview their clients and also learn from an expert, an actual financial planner. So let's see what PBL looks like in action.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a single mom. I have 2 children. My son is 14. I have a daughter that's 11 years old.
Our current house is just a little small.
Is it a one-story?
It's a one-story.
How much have you saved up so far?
We may have maybe about $6,000 for him.
The next day was meeting families. And so, of course, they got to interview them. So the next immediate question on their mind is, well, what do I say? What do I ask?
I was wondering if your kids are active, like they do any sports.
We do believe in getting our kids active in sports pretty early.
Very simple. I emphasize and to be conversational and relaxed and keeping it to the questions and then vetting the questions.
So the sooner you can save, the better off you are. So that goes into college planning. There are many vehicles available for college planning. You can invest in 529 plans.
I had a financial planner named Laura Payne come in to talk with the finance project students about the details of financial planning so that they can understand how to become a financial planner for the families that they were helping.
So this couple wanted to retire at 65. Well, based on where they are, they can retire at 62. So they can retire 2 years earlier, and they're still at 88%.
One thing I love about bringing a practitioner in is it gives life to what the subject means in a way that you just can't talk about. The goal for today is being able to explain compound interest, because that goes back to them meeting their financial goals. The students did a lot of work on calculating retirement, mortgage, and college education costs. And the formulas involved in that is a really supersized version of exponential compound interest equation, which is a learning objective inside of pre-AP. So question 1 is basically asking you, why is the interest after each pay period increasing? everything that happened before was just telling you what it's doing in the calculator. It has that formula, it plugged in those numbers, and then this nice little table. So the standard just requires them to understand the formula of a base number that's raised to an infinite amount, how that graph looks. But I wanted them to really see how in the world that basic formula can be manipulated. So they looked at a basic compound interest rate, and then they looked at how it's worked in a financial setting to calculate savings, to calculate mortgage costs, to calculate all of those things.
Basically, they are.
Okay, I'm going to stop our video there. Okay, so that was just a little bit of that video. In the resources, you'll find where to get the entire videos that we're going to see today if you want to see the whole story. But I hope you noticed some things I'm seeing in chat. Some of you noticed. Clearly, this is an authentic problem. If you think about those essential elements, clear learning goals, students are deep into applying math for a real purpose. The teacher has made some really deliberate choices here about how she set this up. She has real clients for students to engage with. So they're not learning math in the abstract. They're having to think about the needs of real clients and use their mathematical understanding to address those needs. And they're also seeing and hearing from somebody who uses math in a career. That's very important for this teacher, is for students to see where math might lead, where a deep interest in math could take them in a career. So lots of intentional teacher decision-making that happened in this project. What we'd like to do now is open a reflection box. And I'm just going to ask you to think about, based on what you've heard just so far today, are there some things that you've picked up on that might help you strengthen your next project? Some teacher moves or some teacher strategies you've seen in this video, or some thinking about essential project design elements that really might be helpful in strengthening your next project. So if you could just jump into the reflection, we'll see what some of your thinking is at this point. Right off the bat, I see some of you mentioning connections with community members, real clients, real-world experiences. This idea of connecting beyond the classroom often happens in PBL. I'm also seeing some mention of things like reflection, student voice, allowing students to struggle. For Allison, for noticing that, this teacher doesn't make math easy necessarily. She makes it accessible, and she does a lot of scaffolding to make sure her students can succeed. But she wants them to have to wrestle, and creates enough time in the project for them to really struggle with the math and understand it well enough so that then they can explain it to their lay audience, their clients. Take just another moment or two for these wonderful reflections to continue. I'm seeing mention of peer collaboration, students working together. That's a big part of what happens in project-based learning. When you walk into a PBL classroom, you tend to see a lot of student group work, pairs or small groups working together, and a lot of motivation. Students are motivated to help others. I could probably continue with reflection, but I'm going to ask Carolyn to close our poll for our reflection chat, even though there's some wonderful stuff here. Feel free to continue these conversations. Great. Getting back to our slides. And feel free to continue these conversations in the chat box, because I think just as reflection is important for students, it's also important for teachers. So keep those conversations going. Now let's take a quick look at where good project ideas come from. I'm going to show you just a few examples. Sometimes it's looking at your standards and thinking about where they show up in real life beyond the classroom. Sometimes it's paying attention to current events and thinking about how the issues and concerns and events that students are noticing connect to your learning goals. Sometimes projects grow right out of students' questions or concerns. And sometimes teachers borrow ideas from teachers who are kind enough to make their projects visible. So let's start with the first one where project ideas come from. Last month, February, was Black History Month. There was a great project underway in Delaware. I actually wrote about it for Edutopia a little bit, where students were thinking about who are people of excellence in African American history that we want to nominate for awards, much like the Academy Awards. But these were called the Carter Awards in honor of Carter Woodson, who was the founder of Black History Month. So students were having to really persuade audiences because there was voting involved. They had to think critically about what are these qualities of excellence that we want to showcase, who lives up to these great criteria we've developed, and then how do we persuade others to agree with us with our nomination. That came out of current events. Sometimes students' questions lead to a great project. This is an image at the end of a project that took place in Rhode Island, where an elementary student had a great question during what was not intended at all to be a project. It was kind of a worksheet-driven activity to learn about state symbols. What are the symbols and things that help to identify our state. One student raised a hand in the middle of this sort of memorization type activity and said, why don't we have a state insect? Why isn't that on the list? And the teacher could have just said, I don't know, it's not, let's continue. Or she could have pondered for a moment and investigated a little with students. Instead, she invited them to explore that question. They discovered that their state was one of only 4 in the whole country without a state insect. And that led to the question, should our state have a state insect, and what should it be? And here you see a signing ceremony where a bill that the students actually helped to draft got to the State House floor and got enacted so that a particular insect that contributes to the environment, it's one of nature's recyclers called the American burying beetle, is now the state bug of Rhode Island. And these students, I met them and chatted with them, and they could tell you everything about the importance of this insect to the ecosystem. So it went from a great question to a teacher who had never done PBL before, but recognized the value of that question, how interesting it was and where it might lead, how much deeper they got into learning rather than just memorizing a list, really digging in. And I mentioned that sometimes teachers will borrow and adapt ideas. The resources that we'll share with you on the download, the PBL resources document, includes links to some project libraries that will really help you find out where you can find projects that have been tested in the classroom, and you don't have to figure everything out yourself. You can take a good idea, adapt it, and go from there. So good project ideas can start in all kinds of places. Let's take just another moment for a reflection to find out, where have you found good PBL ideas? If you've had some experience with this, where do you look for ideas? Where have you found good ideas in the past? I see someone mentioning the passions of teachers. That's a very important idea to keep in mind. We often think about student ideas being at the forefront of PBL, but often it's a teacher who really cares about an issue or is knowledgeable about something and shares that passion with students that can lead to a great project. I'm seeing lots of teacher collaboration, student collaboration, adaptations of existing content to make it more project-like, to bring more inquiry in. Many of you are mentioning collaborating with colleagues, which I would encourage you to do. It's much easier and more rewarding in many ways to design projects together, support each other through the process. I see some of you mentioning things like makerspaces, which certainly can have a place in projects that involve creating some sort of a physical artifact of learning. It can be a really nice connection from the traditional classroom to the makerspace. And we'll probably take just another moment, Carolyn, and then we can go ahead and close out this. But once again, please keep the conversations going in the chat. Anyone who's thinking, I don't know where to get started with PBL, here's a just wonderful wish list for you of great ideas and ways to think about where projects can start. Okay, And then finally, our last couple of minutes together here today, I wanted to focus a little bit on the teacher's role in project-based learning. We know that this is student-centered learning, that student inquiry is right at the heart of project-based learning, but the teacher's role is so essential. The graphic that you see here, again, comes from PBL Works, and the book on the left is one of my newest. I wrote this in collaboration with John Larmer from PBL Works. And we wrote this book because so many teachers asked us the question, what's my role in project-based learning? If it's student-centered, if it's student-driven, what am I supposed to be doing? And veteran project-based teachers, from listening to them, from looking at the research, from gathering information and having lots of conversations, we've settled on these 7 practices that are not going to be revolutionary or brand new to you. It's just that you use them strategically in project-based learning to support student success. You'll notice that the learning goals, just the same as on the last graphic, it's all about getting to those deep learning goals of knowledge, understanding, and success skills. But then everything around the perimeter here is about what the teacher is doing to help students achieve those learning goals. So instead of spending a lot of time on these, each of the project-based teaching practices, what I'd like to do is show one more clip of an elementary classroom, just so everybody gets a chance to see a wide range of PBL in action. When you're watching this little clip, just for some context, this is a teacher, 3rd grade teacher, Cheryl Bautista in California. She's challenged her students to work in design teams and see if they can create a design of a tiny house, a very small footprint house. They're seeing a lot of these in their community in California where housing is at a premium, and there are concerns about building in a more green and sustainable way. So these tiny houses are starting to crop up. There have been student wonderings about that, and now students are designing their own tiny houses, although I shouldn't say it's for themselves, it's for a client. Once again, they're going to have real clients whose needs they have to address. What I want you to look for in this little bit of the video you're going to see here is what the teacher is doing to set students up for success. They're just going into a round of critique and revision of their tiny house designs. They've done, I would say they're about 2/3 of the way into the project at this point. To look closely for the teacher's essential role in what's happening in the learning process right at this moment. So let's see the tiny house project in just a little snippet.
Them refine their designs of their homes. Students went through a feedback protocol.
I turned the bathtub from here to here because I know that you can't get through the toilet if it was like that. There's the bathroom with the shower. Yeah.
They were paired up with another group and they presented their models, they presented their blueprints and their layout, and they talked about what was in the house and who their client was, just to get some feedback from their peers.
Our client is Miss Pena. Her age is 39. Her budget is $40,000.
Within the fishbowl protocol, what we did was, me and another teacher, we sat in front of a presenting group and everyone else looked around us, just like a fishbowl where they're not to talk, they're not to say anything, they're just really listening and seeing the interaction between the presenter and the guest.
I like how you do go into the living room, but maybe push the bedroom in the back, and then that way she has more privacy.
The purpose of looking at that interaction between the audience and the presenter is so you can think about questions, you can think about behavior within the meeting, and so they can use that as a model for when they go back to their groups.
This is the laundry area, and then here's the pantry to store all the clothes. Right here we have a little office.
We practice different ways to present to their clients. We talk about eye contact, we talk about confidence, we talk about postures, we talk about volume of your voice.
Hello, my name is America. Hello, my name is Christopher. And the title of our project is Tiny Houses. Our driving question of this project is, given a budget, how can we as a design team plan a home for a family?
The last day of this journey is for them to really present their work to their clients, and they were so excited.
Did you have a hard time building the house?
Kind of, yeah. We had to redo some of the walls so that they were the exact measurement. There's the master bedroom. The middle is the kitchen. Here's a room.
They shared their blueprints, they shared their layout, they shared their budget, and they shared their opinion paragraphs that they wrote so that they can try to persuade their client to purchase their home.
Okay, so you see some proud learners at the end of that tiny house project, but getting them to that final success point, that final moment, where they are successful, where they're presenting their work to real clients again, where they're persuading them in using language effectively. A lot of great teaching strategies went into that. So for our final reflection question, to kind of close out today, perhaps think about what are your strengths as a project-based learning teacher. What is it you can bring from your existing classroom practice that perhaps you see little glimpses of in these videos or some of the examples that I've been talking about? I'll just keep talking while you're reflecting here a little bit. The teacher that you just saw, Cheryl Bautista, does a lot of kind of what you might see in a traditional elementary classroom. She uses learning stations, she has literacy stations, math manipulatives, but all of that is embedded in the context of the project. So she's using some of her great teaching strategies that in a really thoughtful way that helps students make connections to what it is they're trying to accomplish with the tiny house. I'm seeing some just wonderful reflections here about being patient, listening to your students, relationships with your students and with others, curiosity, staying positive. Boy, that's important. Lots of modeling. I see that coming up. Just some really nice reflections here. I hope that what you're noticing is that you don't have to reinvent teaching to become a project-based learning teacher. You're using a lot of the strategies that you're already comfortable with, you're already know how to use well, perhaps in a slightly different context. So I hope that gives you some comfort as you think about taking this journey forward. We're going to have to close our reflection just in interest of time, but once again, keep circling back to the chat box and keep this conversation going. Okay, I think I'm going to shift back to Carolyn to kind of tell us where we might go from here. Carolyn?
Yes, and thank you, Susie. Wonderful. Susie, if you want to put, actually I'll do it. I'm going to put the last reflection question in the chat box. What are your strengths as a PBL teacher?
Yeah, that's the one we're just, you've got that over in the chat box? Great, yes, fantastic.
So thank you so much. Boy, have you accomplished a lot in a short amount of time, and I think we can see the response in the reflection questions and also the chat box that people are on board with you. There were a couple of questions in the chat box. One that stood out to me was about teaching, explicit teaching of content. You might go back through and look at Caitlin's question and also the response that she received from a couple people and comment on that as Bess is taking over. Again, let me mention that you can download the PDF that lists all of the resources that we're highlighting today with URLs. The films that you saw that Suzie showed are available in their full length through that document. And then Suzie's contact information is here, but it's also on the resource document. So I'm going to switch gears now and introduce Bess Capitanis, who's going to get us started with PBS LearningMedia. Okay, Bess, take it away.
Thank you, Carolyn. Hi, everyone. It's great being here and fascinating to hear from Suzie and to see all of your reflections and comments. I'm going to take this time to share PBS LearningMedia with you. It's a site that builds on the strengths of public media, and it's designed to improve teacher effectiveness and student achievement. Because some of you may be unfamiliar with the site, we're going to take a little time to go over some of the ways that it works and what you can find there. This is what the home page looks like to math teachers. It's where you'll start your search to find thousands of free digital classroom resources aligned to pre-K through 12. There's several ways you can search. You see the search box there where you can type in keywords. And also along the top of the blue box, you can see where you can search by subjects, grades, and standards. And when you do sign in, you're going to be able to click on the sign in box that you can see in the top right. This is where you can also register for a free account by simply giving your email address and creating a password. This is a list of the features. It gives you an idea of how the site functions. We'll take a quick tour of these, some of them, as time allows here. Resources include these that you see. There are also others like documents, original documents, professional development. And it's important to note here that the video are video clips. We know that engaged learning is not about having students sit through long videos, and that video clips can capture, focus their attention, and encourage further investigation. When you search by subjects on the home page, the drop-down menu shows you this range of content. And when you hover over grades at the top of the home page, you'll find this basic breakdown from pre-K to high school. We've heard a lot about the importance of standards and project-based learning. One of Suzie's slides asked, where do good project ideas come from? And we saw that one source is to look at standards and how they apply to real life. On PBS LearningMedia, you can browse by national, Common Core, state, and next generation science standards. As you explore resources and find those that you want to use or go back to later, you can just click on this blue heart where the arrow is pointing, and it'll turn blue completely, and that means that you have favored that resource. And then once you're registered, you will see your name in the sign in or sign out box in that top right, and the drop-down menu shows you where you can access information like your favorites. Then you can create folders here, assign classwork, and a lot more. In addition to thousands of individual resources on the site, you can find many rich collections that connect you to multiple resources, such as video clips, lesson plans, and interactives. I think I skipped one here. Yeah, we're going to start with this slide that just shows you some of the collections for early learners. Beloved characters from PBS Kids programs like these really engage and motivate them. And they provide curriculum resources in areas like literacy, STEM, and socio-emotional development. We also have collections for middle and high school grades, those early and later adolescents. Many of these are from award-winning series produced by WGBY's sister station, WGBH in Boston. Making North America, a series from Nova. American Experience, which offers award-winning documentaries from this most-watched history series. And American Icons, with lesson plans that allow students to explore contributions that prominent Americans have made to society. Here you see a few more examples, and among the titles there, Frontline is an acclaimed production from WGBH that investigates current events and issues. And we've seen in Suzie's presentation that project-based learning can come from current events or issues. Some collections can provide resources from a wide range of grades. This one, Bringing universe to America's classrooms is from a partnership between WGBH and NASA. As you see here, it has earth science resources for grades K through 12 that include data visualization, lesson plans, games, and interactives. Now we'll take a quick look at just a couple of PBS Learning Media resources that can support project-based learning. This resource takes a cue from Suzie's slide that asks, where do good project ideas come from? One example we saw was a subject like healthy choices from ELA or health. And when I searched healthy choices and narrowed down, I found this clip, Salt, Sugar, Fat, from the collection In Defense of Food. This collection is middle school curriculum. It was developed in partnership with the Tisch Center for Food Education and Policy at Teachers College, Columbia University. It's designed to help students, adolescents, develop practical tools to eat healthier, and they can investigate how food companies influence their choices and create action plans for changing their eating habits. We're going to see just a portion of the clip now.
Take buffalo wings. What are they? You start off with the fatty part of the chicken, usually fried in the manufacturing plant first. That pushes a lot of fat into that chicken wing. Fried usually again in the restaurant, that pushes more fat into that wing. That red sauce, what is it? Sugar and salt. That white creamy sauce on the side, fat, sugar, and salt. What are we eating? We're eating fat on fat, and fat on fat, sugar, and salt.
From fast food meals to all the packaged products in the supermarket, we're eating more processed foods than ever before. They now make up some 60% of our diet.
The food industry makes its greatest profits through the most extensively processed foods.
The key ingredients for those foods, corn, soybeans, wheat, and rice, don't cost the food companies much because government subsidies keep supplies high.
Well, I'm sorry to have to stop the video there. It's really fascinating. It was hard to pick just a portion. It really made me think about some of the foods I eat, and I try to eat healthy. This next example is a search of houses that was inspired by Suzie's video that showed the tiny house project. This video clip is on a solar house. It's from What's Up in the Environment, a program produced by WNET in New York that has standard-based projects on water, land, air, and energy. While this solar house isn't tiny, it is designed to consider cost efficiency as well as the environment.
Interestingly enough, these solar cells regenerate the energy that it took to make them in less than a year. Yes.
This is the inverter. The energy that goes through from the sun through the solar panels comes straight to the inverter. The energy that you're using would either go straight to where you're using it, or it would be stored to the batteries.
The batteries are a backup for when it's dark or rainy.
On sunny days, Chip's family sells the extra electricity to the power company. If the house produces more energy than the family uses, Trip's dad gets a check instead of a bill.
4 words for that: energy efficiency and conservation. Tripp and Alden spent 3 years tracking the energy use in their old house and figured out ways to cut it in half.
This is basically what makes this house zero energy, because it is so energy efficient. The pipes through here, they come in.
Well, I hope you've seen enough to see how this resource can really inform students about energy-efficient houses and suggest ways that they can measure and save energy in their own homes. We want to just give you a taste of interactive lessons on PBS Learning Media. These are self-paced, and they're designed to take a couple of periods. Students can work individually, or they can work in small pairs or small groups, depending on what teachers think works best for the class. We're going to have to skip over. There are so many ways that they're engaged with digital resources on the site. And these slides, these next two slides, just show you an example of some of the range that you'll find for topic titles and for grade range. This last slide with examples, if you take a look at the very first one here, it's called Diversity and Latino Culture, and it's for grades 9 through 12. And WGBY is really pleased to put this up on PBS LearningMedia. It's a lesson that was created from our local production of Presencia, a bilingual program in English and Spanish that tells the stories of Latino communities in Western New England. And through the lens of Presencia, students are learning about local Latino cuisine, music, art, and I think this is a great example of how we can offer content about local culture that's authentic and has real-world relevance. Lastly, we want to share with you WGBY's education blog, where we give regular posts about classroom resources, professional development, like this webinar tonight, upcoming events, and more. This is a screenshot of our UMass student who's assisting in our department right now, and he's introducing himself with a video of himself doing magic because he's an amateur magician. We'd love to have you sign up for the blog. The URL is there on the right of your screen. It will also be included in the PBL resources. All you have to do is put in your email. You'll get an email, your email address. You'll receive an email asking you to confirm that you want to follow us. And I'm going to stop right there. Thank you, Carolyn.
And thank you, Beth. Wow. I'm just kind of overwhelmed by looking at the chat box and then listening to these presentations. There's so much more to talk about, but we're gonna move on towards the end and let everybody wind down their evening. So I wanted to call your attention to some new content that is on PBS LearningMedia. And there's new content being published on the site all the time. By virtue of you signing up for this webinar or being a signed-in user of the website, and of course it's free, I'll always remind people, you will get notices from time to time about new content that's being published. This is a collection on climate change impacts and solutions about drought, and more of these climate change collections are coming soon. This was funded by the Candida Project, and students learn about impacts of drought through news videos of communities facing serious water shortages. They analyze drought data and models and research and evaluate potential solutions. We are hosting a webinar next week, next Thursday, showcasing these new resources and featuring a climate scientist as a presenter, as well as our own STEM director and a high school classroom teacher from Arizona, which of course suffers from drought. The registration link is here. I'll also put it in the chat box, and it's also in the, it'll be on the resource document, I think I put it on there. And if not, it'll be in the webinar, the follow-up webinar that I send out next week. Another brand new collection that is actually in the works, some of it has been published, more of it's coming, is Life During the World War II, and this is a collaboration with the International Museum of World War II in Natick, which is a treasure trove of artifacts from World War II. With this collection, students learn how the war affected the lives of millions of people around the world. It features a wide variety of artifacts from the museum. And this particular resource that's pictured on the lower left is an interactive lesson that Beth was talking about on propaganda in World War II. It helps the students understand how propaganda shape people's attitudes and actions, and as well as how young people and women were affected and contributed to the war. And more is coming in this collection. And there will be a webinar about this April 23rd. The registration link, we have not set that up yet. We're going to be including at least one classroom teacher, probably two, and the education director from the museum is one of the presenters. She's also been instrumental in creating the resources. And we will be including in this, as we often do, the teachers that we present, that are presenters. We ask them to also talk about strategies for AP and ELL and how they use the resources. Brand new on PBS Learning Media, drawn from the Frontline production Facebook Dilemma. And this considers whether Facebook bears responsibility for the rise of fake news. Fascinating topic. I don't know if anyone has heard of the book Zucked, Z-U-C-K-E-D. It's written by a heavy contributor to tech companies who was an early adopter of Facebook and a long-term advisor to Facebook, and he has changed his mind about Facebook. It's a very interesting premise. Zucked. I just purchased it. I'm going to read it next. All right, coming up soon, we're very excited about this summer, a 4-hour documentary from Academy Award nominee Robert Stone, a production of American Experience called Chasing the Moon in honor of the 50-year anniversary of the moon landing. And this is a social studies more production for education than science. And it looks at the decade-long odyssey to land a man on the moon, pulls back the curtain on the familiar narrative of the moonshot that we think we know, revealing a fascinating stew of scientific innovation, political calculation, etc. And I also wanted to give a nod to a new program that's coming out this summer in July. It's a new animated series, and it's really the first of its kind, where the main character is an indigenous child from Africa. She's an Inuit. Her name is Molly, and the show is Molly of Denali. There is a informational text literacy focus, and there will be resources from Molly of Denali available on Learning Media. You, our attendees, teachers, inform all of our work. We host many webinars. We involve teacher co-presenters. We go to national and local conferences, again, involving teachers. We have a growing database of teachers who act as reviewers for us of what we produce through surveys, focus groups, etc. And we have our Educator Ambassador Program. And I noticed that Karen Sean Hines is on the line, and she is one of our Educator Ambassadors, and I think there are a couple of others on the line too. So if you have an interest in being contacted when there are opportunities to work with us, etc., make yourself known. You'll have my contact information at the end, and I'm really your first line of contact, and then we'll involve other people. And if you are in Western Mass, you certainly can contact Bess Capitanis. I want to give congratulations to Jin Chung from Bourne, an elementary school teacher. You are the winner of Suzie Boss's book, Project-Based Learning, and Project-Based Teaching, excuse me. And if you are on the call now, just put your address in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll be in touch with you afterwards and send you the book. This is the link to the post-webinar survey, which will close next Wednesday. If you would like a certificate for this evening's session, a certificate of attendance, we'll send that out to you after you complete the survey. It takes me a little while to do these certificates. I'm figuring out mail merge and learning about that. So the survey will close next Wednesday, and the certificates will be out the following week. They will come to you as an attachment to an email. And sometimes if you haven't gotten it, it's in your spam folder. Even if you're not interested in the certificate, we certainly would love to have you answer the survey and give us some help on what you like that we're doing and how we can do things better. And this is the contact information for Bess and myself. Bess is at WGBY in Springfield. I'm at WGBH in Boston. And we would love to hear from you. All right, so we are right at 8 o'clock, but I do want to acknowledge the extraordinary effort and work that was put into this webinar by our presenters and the support that we received from Sue Klein and the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. So thank you one and all. We know from the response of this that this is a topic that people are very interested in. And so in the survey, I do ask a question about what else can we do. If we do other webinars on the topic of PBL, what would you like to hear about? So if you want to do that in the survey or you want to email me directly, whatever you'd like to do. All right, so thank you to all of you for sharing your evening with us. Thank you to the presenters. And I'll keep the chat box open for another couple of minutes, and then I'll close it out and wish you a lovely rest of the evening. Thank you.